only way to solve the pain of scheduling and planning within a dynamic manufacturing operation is to situate the moving target of demand, or sales and forecasting, alongside moving targets of supply, or purchasing and planning, together within a single integrated platform. CTEC ERP deploys an elegant scheduling system to facilitate allocation of supply to demand as the foundation for all planning and scheduling in a manufacturing company. This demo will cover how demand of both raw material and manufactured parts is forecasted and how planners are able to view and anticipate forecasted demand. Then we'll look at MRP and how planning tools are used to aggregate demand in simple, actionable reports and schedules. Finally, we'll review how production planners and purchasing personnel take action in the system to schedule work orders and vendor purchase orders according to forecasted demand to ensure leanness, efficiency, and timely delivery. Fundamentally, this purchasing and supply chain departments attempt to respond to and stay ahead of 1. What is demanded by the sales department on behalf of their customers, and 2. What is demanded by the production department on behalf of sales. There are 5 primary ways in which purchasing and planning personnel are notified of possible lateness or shortage due to impending demand. 1. Reorder point or safety stock levels. 2. Expiring inventory. 3. Forecasts. 4. Sales orders. And 5. Work orders. A simple way to register a shortage signal to supply chain is simply to set a reorder point or safety stock level. Just set a quantity in the ROP field on any part in CTEC. When an inventory level of that part drops beneath the ROP level, a signal will be sent to MRP, alerting purchasing or production planners to buy or build more of that part to get it back up above its ROP level. You may also set an EOQ, or economic order quantity, as the default amount to buy or build when you create the replenishment purchase order or work order. Another way shortage signals are registered in the manufacturing planning schedule is via expiring inventory. Parts in CTEC ERP may be set with a shelf life, time of receipt or inventory adjustment. This shelf life auto-populates an expiration date for that particular lot receipt of inventory, which may also be manually edited or populated. Expiration signals will schedule a depletion of that inventory quantity of that lot of inventory on the forecast to model when that inventory will no longer be available and usable. Customers may provide an entire year or year's worth of forecasted demand for your products. Additionally, your production department may provide a month's or year's worth of forecasted demand for the labor and materials needed to produce against a production forecast. Both sales forecasts and production forecasts may be stubbed into the scheduling system in CTEC ERP using the module which is aptly named Forecasts. For sales forecasts, simply enter the customer and the part number, quantity, and the date the part is forecasted to be used on the sale. The transaction code may be set as stock, indicating that the demand is for the part itself and is not necessarily to drill down to lower BOM or product makeup of the material. Part forecasts and their respective quantities and dates may be entered in batches by the tens, hundreds, or thousands via the forecast spreadsheet import. Production forecasts to build finished goods and their subassemblies may be entered in order to respond to sales forecasted demand. To do so, simply enter a forecast for your own internal manufacturing company record. These types of forecasts may be set to automatically and recursively drill down through layers of BOM subassemblies down to the raw material levels. These forecasts generate demand signals projecting where subassemblies or sub-batches and their respective raw materials are short and needed into the future, allowing production planners to schedule work orders accordingly. The MRP tools which production planners and buyers run to monitor material need and shortages may be set to include this kind of soft forecasted demand or exclude it and only honor hard demand. Often, planners will include forecasts in their planning processes once per month or once per week, and subsequently only operate against real or hard to order demand and thus exclude forecasts from the MRP. Forecasts are often imported on a rolling monthly basis, where the next 12 months forecast is entered after the previous month concludes. In these cases, when you enter the next month's year-long forecast, it's important to set the delete prior forecasts flag to remove the prior month's forecast and include the additional 13 months forecast in the future. In other words, to allow your yearly forecast to roll forward.
There are two types of customer sales orders, both of which register demand for the planning department to monitor for possible shortage and/or lateness, and respond to by purchasing required raw materials or scheduling work orders for required manufacturing items. The two types of sales orders are stock orders and build orders. A stock order line item is tagged with a ship date, indicating the date you are promising to ship the item out of stock to your customer. A build order line item is tagged with a work start date, indicating the date you must start work on a work order. This date represents the date on which all materials within the item's bill of materials are needed on hand and available to be used to production. Build order line items on customer sales orders are for manufacturing items, which will bypass the finished goods stage and immediately ship all items built on the line item to the customer. Purchase orders for material, or build to stock work orders for manufactured items, whose projected dock date is before a sales order ship date or work start date, will be marked as late or short, and therefore registered to MRP as a shortage signal for purchasing planning to respond to. There are two types of work orders in CTEC ERP: an internal build to stock work order and an external customer work order, which is often helpful for make to order modes of manufacturing. Both types of work orders are tagged with a work start date, which again represents the date you must start work on a work order. This date represents the date on which all materials within the item's bill of materials are needed on hand and available to be used in production. Any material coming in after this date will register a late or short signal to the MRP modules of CTEC. Finally, note that when the planning programs within CTEC ERP are assessing material availability or shortage, the system knows the difference between on-hand material versus material that is actually available to be allocated to an order. In CTEC, an item may have a quantity on hand, meaning it still resides within the four corners of the warehouse and therefore is still represented on the company balance sheet as valued inventory asset. However, that inventory, though on hand, may not be available and counted as valid replenishment or forecasted use toward any of the above discussed demand signals or orders. If the material is actually available, it will show as quantity avail as opposed to merely quantity on hand or QOH. Furthermore, if you wish to see the lineup of which demand signals are forecasted in line to use up the available and/or incoming material, check out the material forecasting tool which CTEC calls the waterfall. Note also that CTEC does support the idea of a hard reserve or hard allocation of material to a specific customer or specific order. Additionally, a pick of an item to a work order also hard reserves the item as unavailable while remaining on hand, so that your planning team does not mistakenly think that an item is available for use to cover an order promise when in actuality it's not. CTEC ERP also contains a number of tools to help planning anticipate material requirements and to help inform the sales team regarding what material delivery dates they can promise to customers. One such tool is called Capable to Promise or Available to Promise. In CTEC, we refer to this as the build estimate or the what if module. The what if module lets a salesperson superimpose demand onto a multi-level bill of materials, allowing that demand to traverse the entire product structure. For each material requirement, the build estimate will stack the quantity needed from the demand input against the quantity available and identify any anticipated shortages. For each shortage, the system will then identify the shortage with the longest lead time, registering a worst-case scenario situation. This represents the longest amount of time it will take to get all needed materials into stock to be used in production. In other words, this is the earliest possible work start date that a work order for this product could begin. Notice that the program is sophisticated enough to recognize that if a sufficient amount of sub-batch or sub-assembly stock is already available, then there is no need to drill down into that portion of the product structure or consider any of its material requirements. Finally, the system will register the production labor demand against labor capacity and estimate the amount of time beyond the work start date it will take to produce the item and produce an estimated ship date. This analysis can be delivered in line to the quote line when sales is considering which dates and availability to promise the customer. Simply click the calendar icon next to the work start date field, and build estimate analytics will return in real time. Note also that sales and planning personnel can run a production scheduling capacity chart to view the next available opening in production capacity to put toward production of an item for any given customer, order, or forecast. To understand material requirements planning, or MRP, you must first understand the idea of allocation of supply to demand, which is most easily illustrated via the waterfall report in CTEC ERP. CTEC automatically tracks the date on which incoming supply of raw materials, subassemblies, or finished items is scheduled to arrive. These dates of impending arriving material cascade downward on the right side of the waterfall. The system also automatically tracks the date on which material is needed for use on work orders or sales orders. These dates of impending demand cascade downward on the left side of the waterfall. Notice that the quantity of material on the waterfall begins with the amount of material currently on hand and available at the top in the middle column. Moving down the waterfall from there, in any case where an amount of supply comes in before the date of its scheduled demand, there is no shortage or lateness. This is indicated by the positive projected material quantity in the middle column. However, in any case where there is either no supply replenishment signal at all, or where an amount of supply comes in under the quantity needed, or where an amount of supply comes in after the date of its scheduled demand, a shortage is reflected by the negative quantity number in the middle column. The function of the MRP tool is to detect any and every such shortage signal, that is, any instance of a negative quantity on any waterfall across all items in the system, and to aggregate those shortages into a single list for a purchasing or planning member to work through. For example, a buyer may run the MRP report once in the morning and once after lunch, filtering the list to only review raw materials, see the BOMS equals exclude filter, or for a certain product code they are responsible for purchasing. Or imagine a production planner running the MRP report to stay on top of subassembly shortages, which are needed to be built ahead and replenished in time for when the production department needs them. The MRP is replete with filters like shortage modes of safety stock or ROP, reorder point versus dynamic supply-demand allocation, internal versus external supply sources or vendors, date ranges and lead times to limit the scope of planning, and much more. Buyers and planners may do extensive inline research to justify their procurement activities on the fly. They might sort and group the items by preferred vendor to help batch together items to purchase on a single PO, as opposed to manually issuing separate POs to the same vendor. The MRP can automatically create POs for multiple items to a single vendor, and once items are placed on a PO, they will clear off the MRP to help buyers and planners keep a clean, organized buy report. Additionally, when an item is placed on a PO, the system will automatically attach a snapshot of what that item's material forecast was at that point in time. If ever a supply chain manager wants to know the reasoning behind why a buyer would have decided to place a PO material, they can check the documents to see what the material forecast was at that point in time. Like the MRP report, the order material report is generated based on shortage signals delivered from the automatic allocation and waterfall programs in CTEC ERP. However, whereas the MRP report is designed to help buyers and planners with a simple, organized item-by-item list of what to procure or build, the order material report is designed with your sales department in mind. This report is designed to be run by order to allow your sales, customer service, and account management teams to quickly identify which orders are in danger of being short and therefore late on the delivery dates which were promised to the customer. For each instance of shortage or lateness, the order material report also publishes exactly which material or part number is the culprit responsible for the lateness. For each such culprit, you may also easily see whether that part has been placed on a PO and when that supplied material is scheduled to arrive. In other words, just how late you might expect the order to be. The order material report may also be run by a number of other filters, by order, by customer, by product line or individual part number. It may even be run in an inverse mode, so you can see a list of all your orders which are scheduled to be on time and which have no material issues at hand. When it comes time to actually place a purchase order and issue the PO to your vendor, the process will begin by setting your vendor and part numbers to purchase on a purchase order worksheet. In CTEC, we call this the P quote or the purchase quote. This screen functions as a vendor PO entry template where you will input basic information like the vendor name, shipment method, comments, not to mention itemizing what items or services or part numbers you would like to purchase. However, in its worksheet state, that is, before it has been approved and committed as a true purchase order, the P quote may also serve as a requisition form or even a vendor RFQ. To use the P quote as a requisition form, simply fill out the comments on what you are requesting from your purchasing and supply chain department, then submit the requisition via the P quote workflow assignment to whichever user has the role and responsibility of handling and approving requisitions and converting them to purchase orders. To use the P quote as a vendor RFQ form, simply leave the vendor field blank or specify a vendor group. Vendor groups are fictitious vendors which may have distinct groups of comma-separated vendor contact email addresses to different vendors which you would like to shop against each other and receive bids for material. Hit the P quote PDF button and send an RFQ out to multiple different vendors at once, with each email address in the BCC field, so that the vendors are shopped blind against each other. When you decide on acceptable pricing from a vendor, go back into the vendor field and swap the name for the actual vendor you'll be issuing the PO to. Then, convert the P quote into a purchase order and issue the PO to the vendor via email. Purchase orders may be entered manually via the P quote/RFQ process demonstrated previously, or automatically via the MRP tool. Additionally, repeat POs may be cloned from historical PO worksheets, imported in batch from Excel, or automatically generated via API from third-party procurement or supply chain systems. Subcontracted or outsourced POs may also be generated from a work order if any of your manufacturing operations are handled by an outsourced vendor instead of in-house. Once entered, a user may send the purchase order over email to the vendor contact by clicking the PDF, previewing the purchase order in its fields to show or hide on that PO, downloading the PO, or emailing the PO directly to the vendor. Additional documents attached to the PO may be sent alongside the PO attachment via email by selecting Additional Attachments from the PO email screen. PO maintenance is as easy as clicking the edit screen and updating fields in the header area, or scrolling down to the line item edit and editing line level fields. Note the non-inventory field, which will be automatically set if the part itemized on the PO line is itself non-inventory. Non-inventory PO lines can be identified by their vertical orange highlights around the part number on the PO line view. Note also the GL mapping, which may be manually set on the PO line edit or automatically inherited from the part default GL mapping or the vendor default GL mapping. These mappings determine what GL account will be posted to at the time of vendor invoice or expense. If no mapping is set, the system will use the default transaction mapping for vendor invoices, depending of course on whether the PO line being invoiced is inventory or non-inventory or service. Finally, note that POs may be handled as blanket contracts, where a large quantity of materials are purchased and scheduled to be delivered on a weekly or monthly basis against the blanket order. Each item may be set with its own unique quantity and delivery date. Unknown quantities may be set to an unknown date in the distant future if desired. Purchase orders remain open until they are either manually canceled or fully received, as in the case of inventory PO lines or non-inventory supplies, or fully invoiced, as in the case of service or outsourced POs. If an inventory PO line is partially received, the remaining open quantity on the PO line will show as the quantity open on the PO line back order. The quantity received will be noted as quantity received. Purchasing and planning tools are aggregated in a single dashboard view called the Purchasing Review Screen. Here, you may quickly monitor KPIs and daily or weekly planning tasks and stay on top of supply chain requirements for your company. Metrics highlighted in green indicate that the task is completed or good to go. Red highlights indicate a shortage or an urgent task that's needed to be addressed by the buyer or planner. The Review KPI set is an easy way to organize your to-do list as a buyer, critical items to stay on top of, like staying on top of and keeping your MRP list refreshed and clean, or reviewing purchase orders to cancel or push out, or locating POs causing critical shortages for your customers, or negotiating with vendors to get better lead times, and more.